Hey everyone, this is Car Ray Rob,
Where you're Ray,
and you're Rob.
and this is our brand new episode of Say Hello to My Little Film.
Hey there, it'll be just a little while till Ray and Rob spit their spittle. Come on, check out of the hospital. So grab some of your best peanut brittle. This will be a darn good transmittal. And say hello to my little film.
That's right, everybody. We are back with another episode of Say Hello to My Little Film. Before we get going here, Rob, tell everybody, what do we do with this podcast?
Absolutely. Here on Say Hello to My Little Film, we take turns recommending movies to the other that we love in the hopes to get them to love them as much as we do.
That's right. We call it our fresh perspective on a retrospective review. And Rob, this is your turn to kind of introduce me to a movie. You got anything good cooking?
Well, I honestly do. And it's funny because last month I thought I was pushing you with A Woman Under the Influence. I came in, I did not know if you would like that movie.
And I did.
And you did.
I did. I was glad to watch that one. I really enjoyed it.
Yep. So you really kind of overcame that challenge. So I've decided I got to come back again.
No, you got an easy one. I got a layup now.
I got to come back again. You say you like that one. I'm going to take it a little bit farther, but this is interesting because this is a first for me.
In what way?
This is going to be my first British film.
A British film.
Exactly.
Cool.
You showed Brian and Charles,
I have
which I loved.
Yes.
So I decided, you know what, this movie is really interesting, and I decided I'm going to show you a British film, and it's not the pinnacle of this director. It's a director we've never done before.
Okay.
And it's not, I would, not considered to be his most prestigious work, but I feel like it's interesting. There's a lot of interesting discussions around it, and I cannot wait to show it to you.
I like when you do this. When you introduce me to a new director, you don't give me just the thing that everybody might think of first.
Sure.
You kind of make me. You kind of take me down a road, maybe to sometimes stuff that's a little more interesting.
Yeah.
A little more stuff to talk about. So, I'm interested in find out what this is. So, Rob, please tell me, what do you got?
What do you got? What do you got? What do you got?
Well, Ray, what I've got for you today is a movie by a director named Bruce Robinson.
I know people named Bruce. I know people with the last name Robinson. I don't know anybody with the name.
So you're unfamiliar with Bruce Robinson.
I think I'm unfamiliar. Am I? You would probably know better than me if
No,
I am.
you probably aren't. So you probably aren't familiar. So that's fine. So he directed a film called WITHNAIL and I, which is probably like one of the great British cult films ever.
Okay.
It's very highly regarded. Everybody loves it. That's not what I'm showing you.
Of course. Of course.
And it's not because it's not I don't love that movie. I love WITHNAIL and I. But it stars Richard E. Grant, WITHNAIL and I, and he has a fantastic performance in that. And he also did Bruce Robinson's follow-up, which is called How to Get Ahead in Advertising.
And we're not watching that one either.
That is one we're going to be watching.
Okay,
I'm advertising what we're actually going to be watching, and that is How to Get Ahead in Advertising, written and directed by Bruce Robinson. It's a very interesting movie. Like I said, it stars Richard E. Grant in another kind of really gonzo performance.
Okay.
Richard E. Grant as an actor is very kind of in your face, out there, very British, obviously. And so he brings something very special to this movie. What it's about is Richard E. Grant plays a ad executive, kind of a jerky ad executive, very pompous, and he really specializes he's currently specializing in pimple cream.
Okay.
So he is like trying to crack this code of like how to get people to want pimple cream.
That's recession proof right there.
Exactly. And in this process, he kind of has a bit of a nervous breakdown. And I will say something pops up.
A pimple.
Maybe. That kind of turns his whole life upside down.
Okay.
And it kind of sends everything into this crazy tailspin. There's a bit of a body horror element to this, which...
not always my favorite
not
thing.
always your favorite thing. So again, I'm pushing you. But I think I'm going to be interested to see if Richard Grant's performance really grabs you, because I feel like it should. There's some great stuff in this movie, but you're right. I am not sure you're going to like it.
Other than the body horror, what else do you think might challenge me?
It's a bit of a, like I said, I used the word Gonzo
Yeah.
earlier. Like, it has a lot of that to it. Like, it's very angry.
Okay.
In fact, it's such an angry movie that, and years later, Bruce Robinson actually almost kind of like apologized
Oh,
for
really?
like how angry this movie is. It was very like it's late '80s, 1989. I don't think I ever said that. So it was made in 1989, right at the end of the Thatcher era of Britain. Everybody was very upset, very mad, as you know, we can
Sure.
completely understand here. And like, so there's a lot of that anger that he kind of takes out in this. And
Okay.
again, it's very much about advertising. There's a lot of interesting questions about that, like, and about the advertising world and the world in general as it pertains to that kind of thing.
I will
So,
say I'm not pushed off the movie yet. I think your description of it sounds like it could be really potentially quite interesting.
yeah, and again, that's the whole thing, is we do not recommend movies that I want you to hate. That
Right.
is not the thing. I want you to like this movie, but I'm not guaranteeing that you will. But
You
it's
know
going to
me
be
well
a
enough
fun
to know I
ride.
might not.
Right, I know you well enough to know you might not, and it's going to be a fun ride finding out if you do.
Well, let's go enjoy the ride, or at least try to.
Let's do it.
And so to do that, we're gonna have to watch this movie. If you guys have not seen How to Get Ahead in Advertising in a minute or at all, go pause the podcast, check it out, come back and see if I like this movie as much as Rob is hoping I will.
Ray and Rob are currently watching The Film. You may be also watching The Film. If you're not, then you're listening to me say that Ray and Rob are watching The Film. They'll be right back when they're done watching The Film.
All right, guys, me and Rob are back from watching How to Get Ahead in Advertising. And Rob, I get it. I get the title. It's a pun.
You got it.
It's a
You How
pun.
to get ahead in advertising.
Yes, I see it now.
but it's good because they, since they made it, ahead and
spell
not
it.
ahead.
Right.
It's not giving it away. It's
No.
not giving away the end.
Well, and is it a double entendre when it is, how do you become successful in advertising?
There you go.
It's still, that is preached multiple times throughout this movie.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of stuff about compartmentalization and how
Yeah.
you once you kind of see the truth of something, and you have the good side and the bad side and all of that. Yeah, there's a lot to talk about in that regard.
A lot to talk about. I don't know where we could start. I think there's some theory and stuff, and usually we do ask a question.
Agreed.
I think there's room for one here. Did you have one?
I do, actually. So,
Ooh.
I talked a bit in the beginning about how angry this movie is.
You did.
And how Bruce Robinson almost regrets it in some regards. Like, I'm not saying he's apologized. Like, I wish I never made this. Nothing like that. But
Yeah.
it's just more like there's a really great interview on the Criterion release of this movie. And he talks a little bit about that. Like, he's just like, he wished maybe it wasn't as preachy as it was, or whatever. And it was it was just so full of his own rage against Margaret Thatcher and England at that time and where they had ended up, that he saw himself as Richard E. Grant's character, as Dennis, and that's all of the rage, all of that coming through it. However, there is another part of that too, where because it's a great interview with him and Richard E. Grant, and Richard E. Grant talks about the prophecy of this movie.
Right.
About, when they made this movie, they didn't realize the world that we would be living in now. And I think that's also part of this movie, is there's a lot of it that came true to an extreme.
Yeah, maybe even worse.
Right, maybe even worse than what they even thought. So in my mind, I'm like, when something has that kind of level of prophecy, is the rage and cynicism justified?
True. That's
You
a
know
good
what I
question.
mean?
Yeah. Because what can be viewed as maybe cynicism then, when this movie was made or came out in 1989, can almost be thought back of as foresight now. Because that's kind of, as a new watcher, what I kind of saw it as. It was a prediction of the future.
Right, exactly. So, I think we should analyze this movie, because maybe there's no other way to analyze this movie, especially with those feelings being out there by the creator himself. Analyzing this movie through the lens of rage and prophecy.
Yeah.
And seeing if that rage is justified.
I agree. And when you want to talk about rage in this movie, you have to talk about Richard E. Grant
Right.
playing Sir Denis Bagley.
Absolutely.
Because he is a force.
He really is.
We've used that word a lot recently.
I know, right? I guess I didn't really even think about that. Like last month, I brought you A Woman Under the Influence, also really amazing,
Which is amazing
performance. And now I'm bringing you How to Get Ahead in Advertising, another kind of tour de force, kind of Gonzo performance.
And way different performances, though. Like almost just as intense, but in completely different ways. Like you said, like this Gonzo, Richard E. Grant, this super manic character, just extremely over the top, like overacting to the perfect amount, like beautifully overacting in a way, where he balances this being like funny and absurd, but still like tortured. It's really like, it's complicated. It's not just overacting for the sake of overacting. It's like it fits the need of this character.
Absolutely. And it's funny because in that interview I mentioned, Richard E. Grant and Bruce Robinson both kind of, I'm going to use this word regret again, maybe having him kind of the Dennis character kind of suck all the oxygen out of the room and be so in your face. But I don't know if I agree with that.
I don't know if I would. Yeah, I don't know if I'd want to see it another way. Like, I don't know how you could like come down from where like once because he reaches this like peak of mental breakdown or whatever, however it ends up actually being. He gets to this peak level like so early in the movie. It's like you can't really come down from there.
Yeah.
Unless he was just totally just trying to fake it and bottle it for an entire scene. But I think about like that scene where he first like sees the Boyle speak to him, and he just starts running around and screaming. And it's like so funny, but you do sense the panic, but you sense that there's some theater going on here too. I don't know. I thought it was great.
Yeah, no, and I think the physical humor that Richard E. Grant was able to kind of encapsulize in the Dennis character, and I think so. Obviously we kind of have two characters here because you have Dennis and you have the Boyle, and they do flip eventually, like who's kind of
Lance the wrong Boyle,
right? So I think we need to kind of figure out. And this main form in the beginning we'll call Dennis, and then the switch we'll refer to him as the Boyle.
That's how I wrote him in my notes.
Yeah, I think that's
I wrote
the
it
best way to go with it.
Boyle, like a real name. But
there
it's
you
still
go.
Boyle.
It's Boyle. That's funny. I appreciate that. But yeah, so obviously again another layer, if you will, and really great layer to Richard E. Grant and his performance is he is playing two different characters.
Yeah.
But but even when the Boyle takes over, he still really encapsulates the worst elements of Dennis from the beginning of the movie.
Yeah. Yeah, he's still this over the top character because it's like it's all that manic, like negative feelings he forced into the Boyle. So when the Boyle takes over, he's still this like really bad person because it's it's all the worst parts of him.
Right. So I think let's talk a little bit about the original form of Dennis pre-Boyle, like just kind of the setup. And that's one thing I really love about this movie is that first scene where Dennis is kind of giving the, if you will, lesson on advertising to this room of advertising executives. I feel like it so perfectly encompasses everything about him. And it's funny because Bruce Robinson even told Richard E. Grant it was the only scene that they rehearsed prior to the movie. And it was because he said, if you can nail this scene, you'll know everything you need to know about this character.
True.
And I think you as a viewer, it's the same thing.
Yeah, it's like exposition. It's not even exposition, but it's like, you're listening to a guy talk, but you can just tell, you learn everything about his mindset by what he's saying there, how he's talking about, he's teaching these kids a lesson on how to sell. And basically the lesson is whatever it is, sell it.
Right.
You know what I mean? And like pick the worst person to be your model or whatever. But I don't have a lot of quotes because he talks so fast.
Right.
But it's a really great lesson in like, yep, this is advertising at its worst kind of thing.
Absolutely. When, like you said, whatever it is, sell it. I think that is the line from that scene. But it's funny too because it also goes to show how much he thinks he just understands people. And I imagine that's something very true about real life advertising executives and people, just because it's like they feel like they have to get into the psychology of everybody to understand
what everybody's
who
gonna
they
like.
are. Right. They know kind of boiling it down into these like boilerplate facts, like this is how many times, like how much toilet paper they consume. He talks about that.
They're gonna have sex 4.2 times a month.
Right.
Well, that's a decimal.
And then it also kind of shows I think in a really effective way the tools that advertising executives use to trick people. So it's like, even the nosh pot must be low in something or high
Right.
in something else.
And that's what we'll focus on.
Right, exactly. And it kind of shows those little tools and the tricks of the trade. And I think that that whole scene becomes obviously the boil and
Yeah.
then like the mantra of the boil.
Because I will say, when you watch that scene, there's almost this, the way he's explaining it, like you're saying, it's like, I'm almost like, wait, does he like what he's doing right now? Or is he talking bad about it? Or is he, you know what I mean?
Right.
You can tell he's an expert at it.
Right.
But I wonder, like, now, you watch a scene or two later and you know that he's got this pimple cream in the back of his mind. I wonder if it's spilling out in that discussion to the students, because it's not like a great lesson if you were a student. You know what I mean? It's like,
Right.
wow, you're basically telling me I have to be a bad person to be good at this in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and I think that is, I mean, going back to the rage angle,
Right.
yeah, I think that's exactly probably
But I mean,
what
I wonder
Bruce
if
Robinson wanted to say.
No, I agree, but I wonder if we said, is this pre-boil, like, is this Richard E. Grant pre-boil? Like,
Right.
2 years ago, story-wise, 2 years ago, would he have presented this lesson the same way?
Sure.
Or since he was starting to have these struggles with the pimple cream, is this like he's already turning
That's
into
fair.
this? I
Yeah.
wonder.
That's fair. The boil hadn't sprouted yet, so I'm going to give
No,
him the benefit
yeah.
of the doubt and say that it is him
No,
pre-boil, but
he
that
was
is a good
just
point.
about
Yeah.
to break down.
Yeah, that's
He's
a
just
good
started
point.
chain smoking. But yeah, you're on, or like, just, there had to be some time when he was innocent. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? At some time before he got taken over by the negativity of the business.
Right. And, he obviously, that outlook really, continues on because,
Yeah.
he has the interaction with like the priest and the guy on the train.
Now, that's a great scene.
Yeah, and it's almost like Schrodinger's cat. I feel like that's what he's kind of talking about with the bag of heroin, because it's like it could be anything. It could be
Right.
a pork pie. It could be
Yeah.
this. It could be that. Or whatever. And then it kind of goes back into that, like, being an expert. Like, I'm an expert on tits and peanut butter.
Yeah.
And and a pusher protects his pitch.
Right.
Like it's like the whole thing is just so in your face, and
Yeah.
and I think it's really effective to sell who Dennis is as a person.
So I will say, I mean, I think that scene is really close to one of my favorite scenes. It's probably my second favorite scene, when he's on the train there and he's selling this idea of, like, you do not know what was in the bag, when it uses the word may.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
And he's just saying, as in advertising, which is the same as writing news, because
Mhm.
it's basically talking about fake news in a way.
Yeah.
Like the word may, they're using that word on purpose to
Right.
trick you. They're not saying that there is this in there.
Yeah.
But anyway, so you have that. You had the scene before when he was teaching about advertising, as we just mentioned, and then the end of the movie is another kind of rant about the negativity of
Right.
of advertising. And I think they're all I think they're three great scenes, and I love them all. But I do think, I guess, if I was going to challenge you on this movie that you love a little bit, like, the movie is heavy-handed, and sometimes
Oh,
you
yeah.
really like subtlety in the
No.
themes and metaphors. This movie isn't.
Yeah, no, I agree with that 100%. Like, and that kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about Bruce Robinson, and kind of like talking about how preachy this movie does ultimately come off.
Sure.
But I think, for me, I think that you can say yes if a movie is overly preachy. Typically, there's some sort of disconnect that the viewer has with it. But I do think that it can work effective. Like, nothing's an absolute.
Sure.
So I think you are going to have issues, or you're going to have cases, I should say, where it works. And I
Yeah.
think this is a movie where it does work. And,
Yeah.
there's a certain punk rock element to it in that
Sure.
regard. You know what I mean? Because that is kind of in your face, and, you wear your beliefs on your sleeve and all of that. And that does come, people can, chuck that up to the folly of youth or whatever. But as we said earlier, a lot of this stuff has come true. So,
Yes.
for being as on the nose as you might think it is, it clearly was that for a reason, because it ended up becoming true.
Oh, for sure.
Or even
And
more true than it is in this movie.
And I feel like, too, because those scenes are so fun,
Yeah.
and they're so outlandish, so it's not like on the nose, where it's just like, you guys know advertising is bad, right? You know what I mean?
Right.
It's not on the nose in that way,
Right.
where it's just blatant.
Yeah.
But the scenes are creative and they are fun. So even though you don't have to overthink what the movie's trying to tell you.
Yeah.
It's still fun and you're enjoying it. So I think, like, if you're going to be on the nose, this is probably the way to do it.
Right. And even like, and while it is cynical, I never feel like the movie falls into nihilism, like, fully. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Where, like, nothing, I believe in nothing. You
Right.
know what I mean? And, like, I do think Bruce Robinson
Well,
has some positive things
yeah.
to say about, the possibility of society in this movie.
Yeah.
But, and I think that's where some of that preachiness can be okay because it doesn't, like I said, kind of just divert into straight
and
nihilism.
and I think what makes that work to that point is like when Bagley goes to quit and he's talking to his boss and he's gonna say, I'm gonna quit and I'm gonna tell the world how horrible advertising is, and then Bristol's like, well, how are you gonna do that? Wear a sign and walk around the street? He's like, if I have to, I will. And then his boss is like, well, that's advertising.
That's advertising.
So I think there's Bruce Robinson's kind of saying like, I'm not saying we can't have advertising, like we always will,
right?
But there's ways to do it that are acceptable.
Yeah. Absolutely, and even with some
to
of
the nihilism point.
No, I agree completely, and then there's even like some elements of side characters, like the vegan friend.
Yeah.
And some of the ways that he interacts with her, and obviously disregards her in many ways because of her belief structure. But I do think so.
But he was right. He was right about her too. When he said she's a meat-eating vegan, and
right?
But then
I did need protein.
I needed more protein.
I lacked protein, and to be fair, like I know vegans and vegetarians, and some struggle with that, and some also there are ways to
now it's better than.
And that's also very true as well. And again, it's one of those things where
but I think,
time corrects some of those things.
Yeah.
Some of those like cynical outlooks on certain things like that. Time does have a way of correcting.
But Penny is a terrible person, so he nailed that from
and that's
the character Bagley
right.
nailed that. So
that's true.
I don't think he was saying she's a bad person because she's vegan. She's a bad person because she's pretending to be vegan.
Right, and I think there's something to be said about that too. Well, and not even necessarily just pretending to be a vegan, but she's just a terrible person because of who she is.
Right.
Not what she eats, what she doesn't eat, what she does or what she doesn't do.
But the reason why she's pretending to be a vegan is because she cares what people think. She's judgmental and she wants to have the upper hand, thinks she can look down on people.
Sure.
So she uses that as a card, but it's it's fake.
That's true. But then you also have his wife, Julia, who kind of balances it all out because like it's like she's kind of like able to bridge the gap between the two, between Dennis and Penny. Her name was Penny. And have that kind of level-headed outlook on both. And I think that that's kind of the thing by the end of the movie where, Penny or Julia finally gives up and leaves. That's the grand statement, and we'll talk more about Dennis, not the Boyle. Dennis's weakness and need turn and how it relates to Julia, because I think as far as the movie goes, that's where it ultimately like lands, like where he while he has his epiphany early on in the movie, like his quest, if you will, is to free Julia from the Boyle and free from the life that this is all kind of built for her, and he ultimately does do that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and kind of like we've said, he is slowly turning into this Boyle. So you mentioned you thought I would really hate the body horror part of this. I think it's fun. You know what I mean? I think it doesn't get to be too grotesque. Like if he was walking around and it was like the size of a tomato, because what I kept thinking of was what's that? Oh man, I can't believe it. The John Candy movie that we love, Delirious. Remember where there's that character in there who starts growing this giant thing on his neck, and he starts getting really ugly, losing his teeth and stuff. I'm like, that's the kind of stuff. If you're not going to do it in a comedic way, that's the kind of stuff I'm like, I don't want to watch this. But really, the Boyle's never that big.
Sure.
He calls it a tomato, but it's like I would call it a cherry tomato.
Right.
But then it grows a hair and it's got a little eye and a nose.
Right. It's got
a
mustache.
But it is kept covered up most of the time.
Yeah.
Until the hospital scene where it takes over.
Yeah. But with that said, the evolution of the Boyle from a special effects angle for the 80s, I thought was, it's just fantastic.
Yeah, I wonder, because there's got to be some little puppeteering that's going through his, not through his neck, but it's around and it's covered up by prosthetics and makeup and stuff. So really good work.
I saw a thing about it. It's like a piece that like goes up like to his neck, like right to the jawline, so the jawline kind of hides it. But and then there's like guys crouched under the bed behind him, like especially in the hospital sequence where they're like working the eyes and the mouth and all of that, So it's great because obviously in today's world they would just do that as like CGI or something, but there's just something so awesome about the practical element of that.
And I do I love the directing and the cinematography with it, in that like it's really well set up where the Boyle only speaks when nobody is looking at
Yeah.
him, or
Mhm.
they can't see if his mouth moved, and they can't tell who said it. Did the Boyle say it, or did Bagley, the character, say it? So I love that I love that idea of just kind of keeping out there. Like, is the Boyle real,
Yeah.
or is this just like did Bagley have a mental breakdown?
Right. Yeah, I agree with that completely because they do it. Bruce does it so brilliantly where you have, like I said, we have those opening scenes where you establish who Dennis is, and then once he starts having his breakdown and the boil sprouts, and he even says like he compartmentalized all the worst elements of
Right.
himself into the boil.
Yeah.
So which is why ultimately when the boil sprouts to a full head and takes over, that's why it's just encompassing all the worst elements of Dennis, because that's what he put into the boil.
Right.
So I think the evolution of the scenes, kind of the mania of it and it growing, really lends itself to the even the special effects itself. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Where it makes it more of an effective turn
Yeah.
for both the physical, Boyle itself, but also the character of Dennis into the personification of the Boyle.
Yeah. I think my favorite scene of the movie is probably
okay.
the psychiatrist scene.
Oh, nice. Yep.
When he's sitting there and he's talking to the psychiatrist, and then at the end of that, when he reveals the Boyle, it looks like he's got a little mustache and a bad hairline
Yep.
and stuff. And so that's kind of like a really funny reveal. I think like that
Yeah.
body horror part was really funny, but everything that's leading up to that I thought was great. Like you start to see like, I don't know, just the way that that Bagley kind of interacts with the psychiatrist. Like he gets what everybody thinks. Like,
Yeah.
I know why you think I'm having a mental breakdown, and and I just love how he's like, I'm not going to let you talk to the Boyle until he's paying for his hour.
Right.
I don't know. I just love this scene. Like, I love his interaction with the psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist isn't obnoxious. The psychiatrist is actually good. Like,
Yeah.
he's helpful. He should be helpful, but it's like he would be helpful if this wasn't really gonna, I guess, really happening, and it is.
Right. Yeah, and that's kind of the crux of it is, it's not in his mind.
Right.
It is absolutely happening. And so in that scene, it's great too because there's the mind meld element of it,
Mhm.
which is the thing that he freaks out about because he knows the bad thing that his grandfather did,
Yeah.
and like
He didn't have a wallaby.
right, exactly. And it was just
that
great.
had me cracking up.
And it was great, and it kind of, I think for you as a viewer, I mean, obviously at that point they still do a good job of hiding whether it's real or not, because when he reveals the Boyle in the mirror to the doctor in that initial scene, it's just the Boyle, but then like when you see it through the point of view of Richard E. Grant,
Right.
you can see, he sees the face.
Yeah.
So there's still a little bit of ambiguity to it, which I think is effective. Is he not kind of thing,
Yeah.
which makes the ultimate sprouting and takeover, I think, that much more of an impactful scene.
Yeah, because you're really not sure. You're
Yeah.
really not sure what's going on. But I will say one more thing about the psychiatrist scene, because, as that quote I just kind of yelled out, but, when they're talking about his grandfather, having molesting a wallaby,
Right.
his hand was caught in his pouch,
Right.
whatever,
Right.
or in her pouch. But that could really quickly, like that's over the top. Like, that could, like, that kind of joke could be a step too far in
Yeah.
some comedies. Like,
Sure.
it almost wouldn't fit tonally, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it does fit because I think I think Richard E. Grant, he's been so manic the whole movie that it just rolls.
Mhm.
I don't know. I just feel like to make that joke land to me as effective as it did for being outlandish as it is,
Yeah.
I thought that was like, that's really good. Like knowing your tone and how far you can push it,
Definitely.
movie wise.
Yeah. Well, and I think Bruce Robinson really wasn't afraid to push it in this movie because, I mean, clearly, I mean, I feel like every scene, as we kind of said earlier, Richard E. Grant kind of just takes over everything with that.
Kind of, I'll say a quick side story. When I was watching that Mel Brooks documentary I talked about on my What Have I Been Watching, he was talking about when they made Young Frankenstein, like he was not going to shoot the tap dancing scene, where where Frankenstein just screams. He's like, that's too far. It's just too easy. It's not going to work. And Gene Wilder's like, it's going to work. It'll be great. And so it's just like, there is a challenge of understanding that balance when you are going to push for an outlandish joke like that, that you've just got to be in tune with your movie, and it seems like Bruce Robinson was.
Absolutely. Another clever thing that I think that is really great, and I'd love to get your kind of thought on it because I could see how it is confusing to a certain degree, is so you have the scene where he's making his video, when he's
Yeah.
got his head in the box and all
Right.
of that, which is such like an iconic visual from this movie, is Richard E. Grant talking with the head in the box being framed that way. And then, obviously he has the scene with the cigarette and blah, blah, blah. But it
Mhm.
all comes around later when Julia
Right.
finally watches the video, and it almost like it's like the Boyle and
Or him are having a
like,
conversation.
Dennis are having a conversation.
Yeah.
Exactly. So my question to you is do you think that it's because he was actually having a conversation through the television screen, or is it because that was the conversation he was having at the moment and the Boyle was just reciting it?
Yeah, in my brain, I guess, or when I was watching, I guess I'm like, he's reciting it because otherwise she would hear the Boyle talking on the film.
Uh-huh.
So like, and so to keep her from being able to hear the Boyle talk, which would prove to Julie that the Boyle is real.
Yeah.
He's saying what the Boyle is saying so that she doesn't hear it. So
Right.
she only hears him.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I played it. But it is incredibly funny scene because, or not funny, but like well constructed. Because
Yeah.
like, when you watch it filmed originally, like when he's got the box on his head, you view it one way, and then when you view the same scene, 20 minutes later in the movie, it's
Yeah.
completely different.
Yeah, and I think it's such a brilliant way to have that two perspective
Yeah,
view
to have
on the same scene.
Yeah, to have the Boyle, both parts of Bagley, I guess, Boyle Bagley and regular Bagley,
Yeah.
communicate on screen like that is pretty smart.
Yeah. And then, obviously it ends up, besides just, once the full takeover happens, which is a great scene, the Boyle's purpose more comes into perspective where, he kind of takes back over and, does the advertising to the extreme, and,
Yeah.
his boss loves him again and all of that. But he also really wants to like breed with Julia.
Yes.
Like he wants to breed little Boyles, like
Yeah.
essentially. And like I think that's such an interesting concept, and I'm sure we'll dive more into it, as we keep going. But this idea of like it's very pervasive right now, where it's like we need to multiply. Like
Right.
people are dying or whatever. We need to multiply. We need to be having more babies.
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of interesting to have that nugget in this movie from that character, from
Yeah.
the Boyle.
I was wondering too if that was some like a personification of like what pimples may think. Like,
Oh, sure.
we need to be like take over
Yeah.
the kid's entire face. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I don't know.
That
I
makes
know.
a lot of sense, actually. That's
But-
really, yeah.
But I also think too, like what I wondered too, like when the Boyle has taken over and
Yeah.
his solution to the pimple cream was, I had this other idea. Let's actually encourage more Boyles,
Right.
encourage more pimples. Like that's a Boyle talking there. Like
Right.
I wonder if like he was never going to sell the pimple cream. Like he just
Oh,
wanted
sure.
this Boyles to take over, and then he was going to kill the cream. And like
Right.
I've made Boyles popular for everybody now. You know
Right.
what I mean?
Where like everybody's Boyle would
Yeah.
become the worst elements of themselves and take over.
Yeah, yeah. And he wants. He's trying to help their birth and their creation.
Right. It's kind of like the original ending of a Little Shop of Horrors when Audrey 2 kind of takes over the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, but I think Richard E. Grant did a great job too of having these the Boyle and having Dennis and having, like we kind of said earlier, the similarities between the two characters, even like being able to show differences in the two characters, even them being so similar.
Yeah.
Like so.
Felt different.
Right. So like the
The
anniversary party scene, like that's a scene that feels like original Dennis in certain ways. The way that he interacts with Penny and just everybody, and kind
Yeah.
of even with the I forgot her name, Monica, I think was her name, where she he's like or no, it wasn't Monica, it was her.
It was Monica.
Well, it was Monica when they were dancing.
That's who we
but it was
danced
the
with,
lady
yeah.
he was talking to at the table. Well, I could sell anything from Boyles to hydrogen bombs.
Right.
And
right.
then he kind of talks about this idea of we put an added ingredient in our bombs, peace. And like
Oh,
I think
yes.
like that's such a, obviously, in the world we live in today, like that's such a pervasive idea
Yeah.
that like military might like that brings peace.
Right.
So
we need more bombs so that we can bring peace. Yeah.
Right, and like the fear, like I sell them fear and then give them hydrogen bombs, which
Yeah.
again, very prescient kind of stuff. but it almost feels like more of an extreme than even the original Dennis. So it's like the Boyle takes it even farther,
Yeah.
and his boss is eating it up.
Yeah, it's almost like the Boyle, I think, maybe believes it more than I wonder if Dennis ever did. I always felt like Dennis knew it was a sales pitch, and
Right.
his accomplishment was just getting people to believe it. But even if he didn't necessarily believe it, he knew what he was doing was a scam.
Yeah.
Where the Boyle believes it.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great segue, because I think one of the biggest things to talk about in this movie is the underlying notion of capitalism.
Oh, sure.
And I think that, where we're talking about like capitalism versus, more populist, true populist, like ideas and things like that. And obviously this being bred out of the anger of tail end Thatcher England.
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot to talk about in what Bruce Robinson was trying to say.
Yeah, I mean that's one of those themes that it's right there. Advertising is here to push products, and that was kind of what the whole '80s was. The late '80s were turning into, right?
Yeah.
Where, like, even in America, like all the reforms were being kind of pulled back. Like businesses were allowed to do whatever they want. There was no restraints on what you could show on TV anymore. You could lie and sell and whatever you want. Didn't have to be true.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, this movie's definitely showing about those pitfalls really quickly, and I think what's always interesting is like we're talking about that hydrogen bomb, like Bagley's character is selling this lie, and then his boss believes it. He's like, no, he's right. This is true. You know what I mean?
Well, and it kind of also goes to show from an earlier conversation how the boss has also maybe not been replaced by a Boyle, but had almost the same journey.
Yeah, right.
Because he talked about that. Like, at one point he kind of had a breakdown because of something, and then like he ended up coming back and he sold, I can't remember what it was, but you know what I mean? Yeah. But it was he sold the hell out of whatever it was. And it's that same kind of thing where it's like maybe everybody in this field has the same kind of existential crisis when they realize like the evil of what they're doing, or the quote unquote evil of what they're doing, and then they have to overcome it, and then they become an even worse version of themselves. Yeah. Which I think is obviously what ultimately happened to Dennis and
they
Boyle.
Just settle into it.
Right. Exactly. Obviously, there's multiple rants. I think is the only way to say it. Really, like through the whole movie
stuff.
Right. And I think a lot of and that could be the. If you going back to our central question about the rage element of it, that is one thing that, maybe you can somewhat sympathize with Bruce Robinson's position on this, about this idea of like, well, maybe if he just didn't do everything in a rant.
Sure.
You know what I mean? That maybe it wouldn't feel as preachy.
But I do feel like it's memorable, though. Because of the rant, too. So that's the tough part.
Exactly. And I agree with that wholeheartedly. And, because even some of the, the stuff, we talked about the box scene earlier, the video ultimately that's created out of that, him talking about they're cutting down jungles to breed hamburgers, like hamburgers are going to bring on World War III, and that kind of thing. And it seems hyperbolic, but it's not so much like the hamburgers are causing World War III. It's what the methods that we're using to sell hamburgers are the methods we're going to be using to sell war. Yeah. And I think that's, again, where we are at right now. I don't think you can have a truer statement than that. I know.
It's like The Simpsons, where it's like, all right, this is all coming true. This is all happening. And I like the similar debate, speaking of capitalism versus communism versus like the cars versus trains. Yeah. Like I thought that debate was very interesting, because it's like, saying capitalism, we have trains, they can move you around just fine, like we can get everywhere we need, but they can't sell you trains because they're already there. Right. There's no money to be made anymore. So and of course he took a train earlier in the movie, but they're selling you, they want to sell you cars because that's something that you can buy.
People love their cars.
They
do.
They're
entitled to them.
And they're going to break down. They'll buy new ones. And so this is like this renewable resource basically for the companies. Yeah. We're going to sell you something that's going to break down soon, so you have to buy another, and you love it. Yeah. I love that debate of that, and that's kind of where he was calling him a communist, was that you like trains, you don't like your car. Yeah. And I love the idea too that you can be labeled something so negative for liking, like,
public transit.
Yeah. For supporting an idea like public transit.
Absolutely. And I think that
a socialist, I guess, way of travel,
of thinking. Absolutely. And that's I think a huge thing that was taking hold in the 80s, which has obviously led to where we are now. Yeah. And you saw it in a flip side of that would have been like the movie Wall Street. you
Mhm.
know, with Gordon Gekko, where it's just like, you know, greed is good. You know, there are people now that look at that and they're like, man, that's like that guy is the man. You know
Right.
what I mean? Like
Right.
it's almost like they're glorifying that now. Like, no, that's not what he was saying. And you know, this movie is very similar in that regard. But yeah, you were talked about, like, you know, being labeled a communist or, you know, whatever, just because you believe in some level of equality. I mean, clearly that's, you know, happening today, left and right.
Yeah.
And
Left and right.
right. But then, you know, but it's great too, because there's that fear element of it when the head sprouts, takes over, the boil takes over. It's like, you think I'd let a little pipsqueak like you undermine society? You're the enemy within.
Right.
Which again, in modern society now, a term we hear way too much.
Yeah.
And it's again prescience.
Yeah. Exactly. I guess that, it kind of just goes back to what we were saying. Like, maybe what Bruce Robinson didn't like about this movie originally, because he thought it was pessimistic or cynical,
Yeah.
is now been shown to be really nothing but foresight, and
Yeah.
has come true and maybe even surpassed
Yeah.
the negativity that he was even preaching here.
Yeah.
Might have gotten worse.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, so we had talked about how he talked about the bombs, like hydrogen bombs, putting
Right.
peace and whatever, and like I could sell you anything from boils to hydrogen bombs, and she's like, the lady's like, I'm anti-nuke, and then he's talking about putting like peace in bombs.
Yeah.
And like other things. Like the movie was actually, from my understanding, from what Bruce Robinson said or in this interview, is that he actually wanted the movie to end with the dropping of a hydrogen bomb.
Oh, really?
So maybe like something very similar to like a Dr. Strangelove
Yeah.
or something like that.
Yeah.
But they didn't
This
have
is
the
the
budget
piece
for
you were
that.
sold.
Right. So they had to, he ended up, replacing it with this monologue, which I guess was supposed to happen much earlier in the movie. But it's kind of I think it almost works in this way because it is kind of the summation,
Yeah.
if you will,
Yeah.
of everything that Bruce Robinson is trying to say and everything that is wrong with the Boyle now that the Dennis character is pretty much gone.
Yeah.
And I think, it works. It works for me.
Yeah. I was gonna say it's a bad ending in that, not that the quality's bad, like the bad guy wins.
Right.
Ending.
Right, and that does happen,
Oh, for sure.
with a movie
Especially
like
in this,
this.
yeah,
Yeah.
it only really makes sense.
It really does.
Because there is no way to change that. Like this was a snowball that was going downhill,
Yeah.
and it was going to turn into one of those giant snowballs where it's going to suck people up, and all you see is their feet sticking out, but it's going to keep on rolling.
Right.
Like nothing was going to stop this advertising snowball at this time, especially in 1989. Certainly nothing's going to stop it now.
Yeah.
But so that's the movie couldn't end with Dennis.
There was no
winning.
happy ending.
Yeah,
there was no happy ending. Yeah, no, I agree with that completely.
Well, the happy ending is Julia escaping,
and that's what. So
Yeah.
we'll circle back to that, because I do think that is, as far as like the weakness and need element of the Dennis character, it was ultimately to free Julia
Yeah.
from this life that he had created. He was doomed. He knew he was doomed. He knew he was doomed when he had the breakdown. And
to be good at his job, he was going to have to be a bad person.
Right.
And to be a bad person, he needed to say, I can be a bad person, but by myself.
Right. Exactly. So, obviously that was the big, like I said, new equilibrium, if you will, for the movie, is that Julia leaves, and that was what Dennis ultimately wanted, for her to be away from him. But like I said, it kicks off that monologue, and it goes to show why that was such a good idea.
Mhm.
The
Yeah.
idea where, I love when the Boyle's like saying, like the world is just a magnificent fucking shop. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like, it goes off on this big thing about like everybody loves their cause. They, like I said earlier, and we wouldn't have this. We wouldn't have anti-aging cream, or we wouldn't have pork pies, or we wouldn't have all of these things. And it's just, this kind of almost like an advert for capitalism.
Sure.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like that's how it's majestic, it's picturesque, it's on this like hillside. He's riding a horse.
Right.
like,
Shirt off.
Right. Like
Yeah, it is a commercial.
Right, exactly. And I think that that's kind of like a subtle brilliance to the end, is it feels like it's supposed to be some kind of a commercial selling
Yeah.
you capitalism.
Yeah, it looks like a shampoo commercial, like you said, guy on the horse, but it's all these ideas that really almost strike fear, and that an advertiser can see this as so appealing. Like his mouth is watering over the idea
Right.
of trying to sell you some of this outlandish stuff.
Yeah. Gets up on the stump and almost does like a Jesus
Yeah,
pose,
I love this. So with the sun right over his shoulder.
Right?
They had to film that perfect time of
Absolutely
day.
perfect time of day, exactly. But it's funny. They go kind of having that scene with Julio, and he's talking about you hear so much of modern capitalist rhetoric in this movie, which it almost makes it timeless.
Yeah.
Where he's talking to Julia about like
Unfortunately.
people either buy or they won't buy. Like nobody's forcing them. They have a choice, and like talking about that and how it's almost like a trap.
Yeah.
Where it's like, well, I'm not forcing anybody to do anything. Like,
Sure. But I'm trying to brainwash you to do it.
right, exactly. And there's such an interesting, I guess behind the curtain look, if you will, about advertising in that regard. He talks about like oil companies sold as champions of the environment and things,
Right.
and that's totally something you see. Like you see oil companies having these commercials.
Yeah,
like,
their logos are beautiful, like very clean.
right, and showing these picturesque vistas, where it's
Yeah.
like, oh, this is we care about the environment, and like they've known about climate change since the 70s.
Yeah.
they don't care at
And
all.
they bring up cigarettes in this movie as well.
A
It's
lot,
the same thing.
yeah. Absolutely. So I think that there obviously is a lot of commentary on consumerism, capitalism in this movie. It's the most in your face thing about
Yeah.
this movie, but like I said, it might be rageful, but it's not wrong.
In some ways, this movie kind of reminded me of that movie. Speaking of cigarettes, like "Thank You for Smoking."
Oh
a
yeah,
little bit.
yeah. Mhm.
So it's because when I watched this movie, I'm like, man, you just wouldn't make movies like this anymore. But I guess maybe they try to, but I don't know if it'd be this crazy.
It's crazy. Well, it's funny. So the way that this movie got made, and this is a cool story. Have you ever heard of handmade films?
No.
So you may not have heard of handmade films,
I think
but you'll have heard some of the movies that they've made. So handmade films was actually started by George Harrison.
The
Of
Beatles.
The Beatles, exactly.
Okay.
The
So
Beatles.
British-made movie. That's what you told me. This was a British-made movie, and it certainly was.
Exactly. And the whole point of handmade films was that he wanted to kind of like take this clout, this money that he had built with the Beatles, and make British like like obscure kind of films. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like
Yeah.
artistic films.
Like let creators do their thing.
Exactly. So they launched with Monty Python's The Life of Brian.
Love it. Great
Absolutely.
start.
And they made things like the original Time Bandits.
Okay. Yeah.
And The Long Good Friday, which is a great film, obviously with Nail and I, which is how he ended up meeting with Bruce Robinson. And it was really funny because Bruce talks about that in the interview where he's like, I went to George and he loved With Nail and I, and he's like, well, what do you got next? And he's like, well, I got a movie about an ad executive who grows a talking boil, and and George Harrison goes, that's great, let's do that. So like,
Yeah.
it's just it was great for him to be able to have that kind of freedom and
that's
find
cool.
a studio that was willing to allow him to make a movie like this, which and you might say like something like A24 or something like
Yeah.
that could make something like this now, but I think
I still don't know
it's
because even A24, they're such character pieces where this is more about
Sure.
like I said, so much about advertising and capitalism. It's about the theme
right.
in a lot. Like we said, the title's the pun.
Yeah. All right, Ray. Well, we're at the part of the podcast where we have two questions
Yes.
we got to answer before we get out of here. And the first one is our question of the episode, which is, does the prophecy warrant the rage that this film really has? What do you think?
I think it does.
Yeah?
I think this. I don't know if movies can really make a difference, but you have to try. You
Yeah.
have to put it out there. And I think this movie was doing a good job, and I think rage is the only way to explain it. I don't know
Sure.
if you could have made the point that this movie wanted to make without the rage. And like I said, the funniest thing to me now is like I don't almost see this as rageful as much as I see it as like predictive.
Yeah.
Because so much of this has basically come true.
Yeah.
So I'm about it. I think I like the tone of this movie. I like the rage. I think that I think it fit the prophecy it was telling that ultimately occurred. What about you?
Yeah, no, I agree, and obviously I'm sympathetic to the idea of a movie not being overly preachy.
Sure.
And I get that, and I can understand, from a filmmaking standpoint, from an academic standpoint, why you wouldn't necessarily
Yeah.
want that to happen. And sometimes it's interesting how impactful subtlety can be.
Oh, for sure.
This is a completely different medium, but I think of Woody Guthrie's "This Land Is Your Land." Like that is a song that is like sung in like elementary schools
Right.
by elementary school kids, but that is an anti-fascist like motto or
Right.
mantra if there ever was one. You know what
Exactly.
I mean?
And it was controversial a bit upon its release.
Right, exactly. And it's but now it's again like ubiquitous in so many ways.
Yeah.
But I do also see the value in rage, because sometimes it takes somebody grabbing you and like putting your face to something for you to really understand it. And this era, especially, like I said, in the 80s, where capitalism was really like giving growth hormone. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like, I think that's kind of the biggest thing to take away from this, is the era that it was made in. And it was like that flashing red light at the time, and like I said, Wall Street, which was also very much a similar thing, you know what I
Yeah.
mean, whereas kind of an anti-capital kind of, warning sign. People now hold that up as like an ideal.
So maybe it didn't work. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So I think sometimes subtlety can be lost.
Yeah.
And so I think for something like, How to Get Ahead in Advertising, the in your face nature of it is what makes it so effective.
Yeah.
Yeah, and but even beyond that, you have to have the right actor in place. You have to have the right director behind it. You got to have the right script.
Yeah.
And I think they had all of that.
And I think the tone has to work too. I think hiding this and like not hiding it, but using like the dark comedy that helps too. You know what I mean? Like the medium, the tone, all that stuff, it compiles together.
Yeah, I agree. And I think because of all of that, I absolutely forgive and embrace the rage of this movie as something that was absolutely well warranted. Now we
Oh,
have
boy.
to get on to the biggest question and why we even do this podcast,
Yes.
Ray. And I brought you How to Get Ahead in Advertising, not knowing if you would like this movie. I thought there was some stuff that maybe just wouldn't ring true with you,
Yep.
as far as your, proclivities go. But, now I got to find out if that is accurate. I'm on the fence here. I think we'll see. But Ray, before we go, did you like How to Get Ahead in Advertising, and would you recommend it?
Well, the fact of the matter is, Rob, I did like
Oh
this
man, I am 2
movie.
for 2.
I know.
Oh man.
Again, I mean, Richard E. Grant, first of all, was just like, it's hard to
So
stop
good.
watching him. Like a couple, I mean, he's just, I just always felt like in my brain, I kept thinking, if they had to shoot this scene more than 2 or 3 times, like, he would just be broke out in a sweat, just like Gonzo. Like, how does he do it? How does he keep it up for this entire movie? It's an impressive performance. It's different than what we saw last week with The Woman Under the Influence. Like, I'm not gonna say this is the greatest performance I ever saw, but I respect it. It's a super fun one. It's a really, really good one.
Yeah.
It's perfect, and he's perfectly cast. So that that helps the movie a lot. And then I think, like we've mentioned, like I don't necessarily mind when the movie isn't like too subtle for its own good. Like,
Sure.
And I think because the way this movie used the dark comedy aspects to be so in your face with the theme,
Right.
that I didn't think it crossed the line of being too on the nose either.
Yeah.
Or it was effectively on the nose.
Yeah.
So I had fun with that, and I had fun with that theme. We were just talking about, like, that's something that is prescient, and then I kind of relate to and speak to as well. This whole capitalism versus socialistic ideal or whatever. I just think it's a great lens at that. So appreciate the lens. Love the acting. So yeah, I have to say at the end of the day, I really enjoyed this movie. I do recommend this. I would strongly recommend people go check this out. I think it's fun, and the body horror stuff is fine. It's totally manageable. It's actually kind of cute in its own weird way.
It's kind of cute. That is definitely not a word I imagine Bruce Robinson would have
grown
thought
a
of
hair.
when he was making this movie. Well, all right, Ray, you loved How to Get Ahead in Advertising,
Sure.
much to my surprise. To my surprise.
Keep you on your toes. You don't know what you're gonna get with me.
I know, but I'm super, super pumped about it. But I feel like you owe me a little something now.
Sure.
You owe me a little something. So before you go, you got to tell me, what have you been watching, and can you recommend anything?
Yeah, I think so. I've watched quite a couple things. I watched Wicked for Good.
Okay.
I know you talked about that when that
Yeah.
originally came out, and
Yeah.
I kind of felt a lot of things. I think the same way you did.
Because you're a poser.
I guess, or you brainwashed me into thinking this, but you didn't let me
I
give
am
the
your
movie a
cult
fair
leader.
chance. But yeah, definitely the first half of that is a lot better than the back half.
Yeah.
Timeline wise, I always kind of say I hate when everything happens. It feels like in 5 minutes, and I do think like the Scarecrow, Lion, Tin Man stuff does kind of feel like a little jumbled in there,
Yeah.
like a little extra. I know you said that's not the way it is in the books.
No,
and
it's
stuff,
completely
but,
different in the books. Yeah.
but fun enough, you know. Weird seeing that the Wicked Witch doesn't die, you know.
Yeah.
but
Which is I that I that they changed that from the stage show even.
oh really? Yeah.
Yeah.
Just add that little extra
Yeah,
piece.
they
Let's end
added
on
it.
a happy note.
Yeah, let's end it
thing.
on a happy note.
Okay.
Exactly.
I watched Mercy with Chris Pratt, where he's tied up in the
Yes.
chair.
Oh, right. That kind of like had a Minority Report vibe. To
Very
it.
Minority Report-ish. The one thing I didn't get from the trailer was like that the judge of his trial, the
Mhm.
mom in Dune. I can't remember what her real name is.
Oh, I'm blanking on that too.
But she's AI and
Uh-huh.
she's not a real person. And so
Oh.
there was like a theme in the movie about like is AI good? Like, you know, he had this there's a 98% chance you're innocent, and you know, I would say the first 40 minutes of the movie is kind of fun, and then it kind of I think falls apart a little bit. But you know, there was kind of thing like he was like when he starts using his gut to like figure out some clues and he's right, it's like starts to break the AI. It's like can't understand how to use your gut and intuition. And it's kind of like AI, see, you're not perfect. But then at the end of the movie, they end up being like humans made mistakes too. And it's like, all right, AI, I guess we both learned that we both make mistakes. I was like, what in the world theme
That's
is
weird.
this?
That's weird.
Did not work. That
Yeah.
was not
Rebecca
good.
Ferguson.
Okay, yes, Rebecca Ferguson. So, and it's like Chris Pratt does a good job and stuff. I just feel, and like I said, the first 30 minutes of the movie I think are kind of fun. Like it's a great idea,
Right.
like him trying to prove himself and like using all this, you know, Big Brother filmography,
Right.
camera angles and stuff. Great idea, but I just don't know if there's a 2-hour movie.
That's what I
yet.
got out of the trailer. In all honesty, I'm like, this is going to be a great idea. This was a great pitch, just not a great
easy
thing.
pitch,
Right.
easy pitch, hard movie to make,
Hard movie to make. Exactly.
And then I watched Hamnet.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, and so
It's
that
about a little bitty pig.
what you call him?
Well, it's not about a little bitty pig.
Yeah, no.
In fishnets.
It is about.
It's a pig who wears fishnets.
There you go. That would
That's
be
what it
the
is.
easy pitch.
The
Hard
easy
movie to
pitch,
make.
hard movie to make.
But yeah, Hamlet's a bit of a kick in the balls. Like great performances.
Yeah.
I did, like honestly, I don't know if I love it as a movie. I love the performances. Like they are top notch. The kids in the movie are amazing. Like Hamnet is amazing, but like the whole movie overall, I'm like, bit of a downer, bit of a drag.
Well, I definitely did not strike me as the feel good movie of the year.
No, certainly not. But I just don't know if there's like a lot there. It's like, you know, we have a kid, the kid dies, we're sad about it.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, that is what happens. It's like I don't know if that's a great movie. You know what I mean? Again, amazing performances. The pain, the anguish, all these things being shown were great. Really well directed. I think it's the girl that did Eternals for Disney Plus,
Zoe Shao
for MCU. But Zoe Shao. I just don't know if the story was thick enough for me to like really sink my teeth into. But very moving, hard to watch in a good way, I think. But that's kind of been it for me the last couple weeks. What about you? What you been checking out?
So let's see. I've got some couple that I definitely recommend. Couple that I'm like, so there's one that I really recommend, The Ugly Stepsister. It was actually nominated for an Oscar for makeup, I think. It's on Shudder, which you know how much I love Shudder, and it's kind of a dark telling of Cinderella.
Okay.
But it's kind of cool because you kind of follow the stepsister in a way, and it's kind of like about
never left her room or did anything.
Well, sure, but you know how like Cinderella comes, she's got these stepsisters, you know, and the mom's trying to like get them to, you know, find a husband, all of that. So there's like a stepsister, there's Cinderella, and then her stepsisters, and you follow one of the main stepsisters who's kind of like an ugly duckling, and she goes through like these great lengths to, you know, make herself beautiful, and there's a bit of body horror in that. And
checking all your boxes recently.
Exactly.
Here we go.
And but she kind of becomes very, overtaken by this notion of beauty, and and it forces her to go further and further and further, and she really kind of becomes like the villain, obviously, in a way, and which is interesting because you root for her in the beginning. She's the main character, like we always talk about. So there's some really interesting dynamics between her and the Cinderella character and all of it. It's a really good movie, and it's Andrew's watching Bridgerton right now, and I like
Mhm.
caught a little bit. I've never watched Bridgerton before, but I like caught a little bit of it before, and I'm like, this is the dark version of Bridgerton
Sure,
from what I
sure.
watched, a little bit of that. And I'm like, people, if you watch Bridgerton, watch The Ugly Stepsister, especially if you like horror as well. Let's see. Then one of them, I okay, I like this movie. I'm not gonna like down it too much, but I watched The Roses.
You're really selling me right now.
I'm sorry. I watched The Roses.
Okay.
And Olivia Colman and
Is that supposed to
Benedict
be a take
Cumberbatch.
on the War of the Roses?
It is a remake of War of the Roses.
It is.
It is. 100% is. But so the thing about this movie that was seemingly so frustrating is, you know how much I love War of the Roses.
I don't know if I
It's-
know how much you love it,
I
but
love
I'd
War of
assume
the
you
Roses.
love it.
I
yeah.
love War of the Roses.
Great movie.
It's a great dark comedy. A great dark comedy. And the thing about the Roses is so I'm like halfway through this movie, and I'm like, it doesn't feel like the War of the Roses. Like, you know, their marriage is like kind of dissolving in a way, but it not really. And
Yeah.
like, it almost feels too. Like they're just trying to do something different. Like
Yeah.
it's too much of like just a regular kind of like comedic drama, if you will. And then
It's like doing War of the Roses, but they don't hate each other?
right, kind of, but like, and then they get to that point where it's like it becomes a little bit more apparent, but not nearly as apparent as it is in War of the Roses. But then the last 30 minutes, it goes like full bore.
Okay.
War of the Roses, and it comes out of nowhere.
Yeah, it
and
doesn't seem
feels-
justified.
Right, no, not at all. And it gets very like extreme in the last 30 minutes, and it's over like in a flash in that point where it's
Mhm.
like, you know, the War of the Roses, the original one, kind of bubbles and percolates through the whole movie, and it
Sure.
feels like fully formed. This just felt super rushed at the end, like to make it feel like it's like either do the movie or don't.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
like don't try to shoehorn it in at the end. But the performances are great. Like, because like I said, Olivia Colman and Benedict Cumberbatch are great, and they're great together. Like, they play off of each other so well. Like, the chemistry is there. I just wish that if they were going to remake this movie,
Go full bore.
right,
Push
go
it.
full bore and do it. So that was my big thing with that one. It's not worth checking out, but just go in just knowing it's not going to hit the heights of the War of the Roses, and it is different. Another movie that I was disappointed in was Honey Don't, which is the next movie that Ethan Coen made with his wife Trisha Cook.
Yeah, like a honey don't list. Like, hey,
right.
you don't have to take out the garbage today. You don't have to paint the siding of the house.
Well, not like that at all. But so
Close, just not like that
just
at all.
not like that at all. But so it's like kind of another in the vein of like, so they did Drive Away Dolls recently, which I wasn't a huge fan of either. But in the end of these two movies, I like that one more. But like they're both kind of these really like homage, I feel like, to like 40s B movies. So in this one, it is oh crap, Andy McDowell's daughter that's in The Substance.
Nope, sorry. Not going to be able to be any help here.
Oh crap, Margaret Qualley. She is in it. Again, she was in the first one. She's in this one too, and she's like a private detective, and she plays it great. Like, she plays very much like a 1940s, you know, noir detective. Has all the mannerisms, has it all down. Like, she is a lesbian, and she has a relationship with Audrey Plaza, who's also in the movie, and like they're able to kind of like mix this modern world in with these 1940s pulp really well. But the story goes almost nowhere. Like, Chris Evans is in it, and like his story kind of just like falls flat. And like it's like this kind of weird overarching, almost red herring that just goes nowhere.
Yeah.
And the ending comes out of left field, and you're like, wait, what just happened? And I feel like, you know, where like the pulpiness and like over sexualization of in Drive Away Dolls, you know, kind of like flaunting like female sexuality like they did in Drive Away Dolls. They do that in this as well, but I think it's to a less effective nature. So I don't know. This one just felt like, again, like a step down, and it makes me long for the Coen brothers to come back and like make a grand
Join
return,
forces, create
right?
the ultimate movie again,
Great,
please.
like come back and create something great again. So then the last thing that I watched that I wanted to talk about is Begonia.
Ooh.
Yeah, Yorgos Lanthimos' new movie with Jesse Plemons and Emma Stone. I think this is like her fifth movie with him, fourth or fifth movie with Yorgos, and I highly recommend this movie.
Do you? Okay,
I
good.
highly recommend Begonia. It's cool because like the premise is kind of nuts. So they kidnap Emma Stone because they think she's like a high-powered executive for a pharmaceutical company, and they think like Jesse Plemons and his sidekick think she is an alien, and they have it like she got this whole backstory and like how
An
like,
illegal
her race
alien.
is taken. No, like from another planet.
An extraterrestrial.
Exactly, an extraterrestrial, and so they kidnap her thinking that she is this alien species that's trying to destroy the Earth. And the great thing about it for me, really, for the bulk of the movie, it's very straightforward. The kind of Yorgos Lanthimos element of it really is in the performances and like certain moments.
Yeah.
It really like doesn't try to like be weird for weird's sake or anything like that. It's his direction, his cinematography and stuff like that. It's really what kind of sets the tone for this movie in such a great way, and it kind of builds up to a really great ending in my mind. But it's like I said, I think this is his like fourth or fifth movie with Emma Stone. So I'm just kind of like, are you just going to work with her forever? Is there going to come a time when you don't?
Now?
Right. So we'll see. But they haven't, I haven't watched all
working.
of them. Yeah, it's working. There's a couple of them I haven't seen, so I don't know if they've worked all the way through. I've heard some mixed things about some of them, but Begonia is definitely a good one.
All right, Rob. Well, let's wrap up this conversation on how to get ahead in advertising. We did a great job. And now we need to sell the audience.
Yes.
I'm doing one more thing for us. Liking the podcast would be great. Liking the episode would be great. Subscribing to the podcast would be even better. Leave us a 5-star review if you're able to, because if you do, we're going to read your review live on air someday. Don't forget, you guys can email me and Rob at carrayrob@gmail.com or reach out to us on Blue Sky at carrayrob.
Absolutely. We are now also on Instagram and Facebook. By all means, go over there, give us a follow. Help us advertise.
Yes.
Help us advertise so we can grow this film audience, this film-loving community, which is what we are desperately trying to do.
If there's much appreciated.
Absolutely. If there's a comment section on whatever platform you're on, by all means, let us know what you thought of how to get ahead in advertising. Was the rage warranted? Ray and I both would like to know. We will be back next week with this month's episode of A Copy of a Copy, where Ray and I are revisiting the classic spaghetti western, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and the Korean western, The Good, the Bad, and the Weird, which Ray's never seen.
I've never seen. Let's check it out.
Yeah, that's going to be a fun time. We will be back in 2 weeks with Ray's episode, which he's got to top me now because I'm setting the bar so high.
I have an idea.
Do you?
I have an idea.
All right, we'll see. But then we will be wrapping up this month with this month's episode of Hello Movies, My Old Friend, where Ray and I are going to be revisiting the 1993 crime thriller, A Perfect World.
Here's some Kevin Costner going.
Get a little Kevin Costner in there. You got to love it. But you are not going to want to miss a single one of them. But until then, this is Car Ray Rob.
Where I'm Ray.
And I'm Rob. And remember, be defined by the films you love, not the ones you hate.
Hey there, it'll be just a little while till Ray and Rob spit their spittle. Come on, check out of the hospital. So grab some of your best peanut brittle. This will be a darn good transmittal. And say hello to my little film.
Hey everyone, Ray here. I want to drop a stinger for my episode in 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, I'm going to make Rob watch the Indian film RRR. Yes, 3 letters. I think this movie is a whole lot of fun. If you haven't checked it out, you really need to. It's set in pre-independent India. Basically, we have this famous warrior on a really, really impossible mission. He comes face to face with a cop serving the British forces, and they kind of end up joining forces in a way to kind of get this mission accomplished. The plot is good. The plot is fun. The movie is the set pieces. It's Bollywood movie at its finest. It's amazing. It's fun. Marvel should take a lesson. You guys check it out and hear everything we have to talk about, and hopefully Rob will enjoy RRR.